editor at the Financial Times, has told LBC News more about why the two senior Tories have parted ways with the party.
James Heappey, the well-respected Armed Forces Minister, finally handed in his notice. He had made clear that he was going to do that ahead of stepping down as an MP at the general election. I think, very notable that he used his final appearance at the dispatch box yesterday to make a very pointed call for more defence spending, a sort of outgoing parting shot at the Prime Minister. And then, of course, Rob Halfon, very much a surprise, quitting as Skills Minister and announcing that he too will step down at the general election. And quite interesting, he posted on his Twitter profile two letters, one to the Prime Minister and another to the chairman of his local association, and in the latter one made a slightly humorous reference to Lord of the Rings, saying that you will need no help among the great you are. Notably, didn't make the same reference in his letter to Rishi Sunak.
And figures show more people have been looking up information about cancer since the Princess of Wales revealed she's having treatment. Charities, including Cancer Research UK, have seen an increase in people going onto their websites. Dr. Elizabeth Rapper from the University of Oxford has researched the importance of families being open about it. She's told LBC News it can be difficult, but there are benefits in the long term.
This is one of the most difficult conversations parents are ever going to have. However, we know that all of the research shows that not telling children doesn't protect them, and that when children are given an honest and emotionally authentic explanation for what's going on in the family, because we know children are such astute observers, they know when things are different in their routines or people are upset, that actually we know if we give them an explanation for what's going on, it helps with their family functioning and also short and long-term mental health outcomes. Obviously, it's very upsetting and very worrying when we're given a diagnosis, so it's okay. I think it's about saying it's okay to children to feel worried and upset, but actually together as a family we're going to get through this, and in the short and long term we know that that helps children deal with what's going on around them. And I think when we think about talking to children about illness, we always have to think of the flip side. If we don't tell them what's going on, children often can reach their own conclusions, which might actually be wrong.
This is LBC News. We'll take a look at the financial news headlines next.
This is LBC News.
A traffic update for all late-night travellers. There are delays elsewhere getting to bed due to a hold-up at Grand's never-ending stories. Please take the diversion via Mayor Chicken or a warming latte, which will see you home. Plenty of McDonald's restaurants are open late tonight. See mcdonalds.com for opening times.
I never thought of myself as the giving type, but I guess I am. I give my elderly neighbour's dog a walk every night, despite its barking being my alarm clock every morning. And I give blood when I can, because it helps combat cancer. It takes an hour and saves lives, like my mum's, who was here long enough to see her grandson take his first steps. Hiya! Coming! And she's still here. If you're the giving type, join the thousands of us giving blood every day. Book now at blood.co.uk.
You could be our next Win Plus winner. Enter now to win big cash prizes and loads more at winplus.co.uk. 18 plus, GB only, T's and C's apply.
LBC News. Weather.
There'll be bright or sunny spells to start Wednesday for London, but another band of blustery rain will move east across the capital during the afternoon. Some of that rain will be heavy. The day will feel cooler with a high of 11. Things are set to stay unsettled for Thursday, Good Friday, with further blustery showers or longer spells of rain, which could be heavy and thunder at times. There will also be some drier spells. It should turn drier and warmer through the long weekend. Temperatures are expected to get up to 15 Celsius on Easter Sunday.
I'm Ed Brown, this is LBC News. Some business headlines now. In the city, the FTSE's closed up 13 points at 79.30. The Cooperative Bank is planning to cut 400 jobs, or 12% of its workforce. Roles will be lost from across the business, with some staff being redeployed, but no branches will close. The firm says it wants to simplify its business and reduce costs after last month reporting annual pre-tax profits had nearly halved. Pizza chain Papa John's is shutting 43 restaurants across the UK. It says the sites are underperforming and not financially viable. Closed by mid-May following a consultation process, but it's not clear how many staff will be affected. Price rises at the supermarkets are continuing to ease and are now at the lowest level for around 2 years. Market researcher Kantar says the most recent figures show annual grocery price inflation has fallen from 5.3% to 4.5%. That's been helped by cheaper butter and milk, although sugar and sweets are more expensive. And nurses, doctors and teachers have been the hardest hit by recent prices in inflation. The Institute for Fiscal Studies has been looking at private sector pay, which has fallen in real terms since the beginning of 2010. Nurses have seen their incomings fall by 6%, while teachers and doctors are getting around 10% less. Has hit out at the government for failing to modernise air travel. Jet2 CEO Steve Heapy called on the government to get a move on if it was serious about reducing carbon emissions during an event at Bournemouth Airport today. LBC News reporter Joseph Draper has been at the airport.
Well, it's been announced that Jet2 will launch flights here from spring 2025, potentially creating hundreds of jobs for the region over the next few years. Now, talking about this new arrival, the airline's CEO, Steve Heapy, made some rather pointed remarks about the government, telling them to get a move on with modernising aviation.
An estimates range between 10 and 15% saving carbon dioxide emissions, which surely is what everybody wants, so there is no reason for inaction.
Currently, flights rarely travel directly from point A to point B, simply due to the amount of air traffic, wasting huge amounts of fuel in the process. The managing director of Bournemouth Airport, Steve Gill, told me the government needed to engage with the industry to improve aviation systems.
Modernisation is needed, and it's needed quickly. But the government have not been particularly proactive in helping everybody involved in that system move forwards, both in terms of the complexity of the process and the funding required to move that process on.
It's thought the arrival of Jet2 here in Bournemouth will offer holiday-goers across the south of England an easy escape from locations in Europe and the Canary Islands without the stress of getting to London Gatwick.
The Department of Transport says UK airspace is one of the most complex in the world, and is currently working with the Civil Aviation Authority to modernise it.
Where the news never stops. LBC News.
In the sports, Wales have failed to reach Euro 2024, losing on penalties against Poland in their playoff final. The match finished goalless after extra time. Leeds winger Daniel James missed the crucial spot kick in a 5-4 shootout defeat. England's under-21 side have thrashed Luxembourg 7-0 to make it 6 wins from 7 in Euro 2025 qualifying. Northern Ireland came from behind to beat Serbia 2-1 and only their second win of the campaign. England number 8 Sarah Beckett's been given a 3-week ban after her red card in the Women's Six Nations against Italy on Sunday. She was sent off for a dangerous clear-out which resulted in Italy's Michela Solari fracturing her leg. Beckett will miss England's matches against Wales, Scotland and Ireland, but can return for the final match of the tournament against France.
This is LBC News.
And a turn to some showbiz now. Filming has begun on the 5th and final season of Netflix's You. Penn Badgley has played the serial killer Joe Goldberg since 2017 and was spotted in New York this week shooting scenes for the show. A release date for season 5 has yet to be announced. And Jack Black says that having someone that believes in you can make all the difference when creating art. The actor stars as Poe in Kung Fu Panda 4 and has covered a song by Britney Spears for its soundtrack. He says encouragement from people he trusts helps him overcome.
Take the diversion via Mayo Chicken or Walnut Latte, which will see you home. Plenty of McDonald's restaurants are open late tonight. See McDonald's.com for opening times.
Right, so Tina talked with Gina because Jane's in training and Jim's in for Tim because Rick's gone sick. Pat and Neve are on mat leave and Dexter's doing extra because Stu's got time in you. Oh,
Sounds like you need Usoft.com, the online store.
They learn the lessons that you meant need them to learn on the Canuco.
It's 1 o'clock GMT. Hello, I'm Rahul Tandon, and this is Business Matters here on the BBC World Service. We're connecting those time zones, and today we're in the world's two largest economies, the US and China. Coming up, the US city of Baltimore tries to come to terms with the deadly crash of a container ship into a major road bridge.
You know, it wasn't like normal everyday people on the road. There was workers, and my husband does that kind of work, like road work. And you know, it could have been his friends, scary and stuff.
How long could it take for the port to reopen?
It could be weeks, it could be months. It really depends on so many different factors of how easy it is to clean up the ports. You're going to have to do dredging. You're going to have to do, analysis on the vessel itself. How are you going to tow her back to port?
We bring you the latest here on the BBC after the latest news.
Hello, I'm Maura Alderson with the BBC News. The US Coast Guard says 6 people still missing after a container ship brought down a key bridge in the city of Baltimore are now presumed dead. At a news conference, Rear Admiral Shannon Gilraith said it's unlikely the victims are alive because of the length of time they've been missing and low water temperatures. Our correspondent, Will Vernon, says the Coast Guard stressed the desperately difficult conditions of the search and rescue operation, which has now become a recovery mission.
The water here is very cold, it's very deep, there are extremely fast currents too, and the visibility in the water is very poor, and of course it is full of jagged metal from the bridge that collapsed, meaning the conditions for rescuers were very difficult indeed.
The 6 missing men had been working on the bridge to repair potholes. Our correspondent says 2 of them are known to be Guatemalan nationals. The US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has reiterated Washington's message to Israel that the number of civilian casualties in Gaza is far too high. In talks with his Israeli counterpart, Yoav Gallant, at the Pentagon, Mr. Austin said Gaza was suffering a humanitarian catastrophe and the situation was getting worse.
The safety of the 1.5 million Palestinian civilians in Rafah is also a top priority for the United States. Now, we continue to share the goal of seeing Hamas defeated, so we'll discuss alternative approaches to target Hamas elements. We must also plan for Israel's security after this conflict ends.
The Biden administration has also disputed Israeli government's claims that Washington's refusal to use its Security Council veto had emboldened Hamas. Thousands of Hungarians have marched in Budapest demanding the resignation of Prime Minister Viktor Orban after a former official released a recording allegedly implicating ministers in a corruption scandal. Our correspondent in the capital says recent claims by the ex-official Peter Magyar alleging mafia-style practices in Mr. Orban's administration have made him a hero to some and a public enemy to others. The independent US presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has announced a Silicon Valley lawyer and philanthropist as his running mate. 38-year-old Nicole Shanahan is the former wife of the Google co-founder Sergey Brin and has never run for office before. Robert F. Kennedy, an anti-vaccine activist and nephew of the former President John F. Kennedy, paid tribute to Ms. Shanahan as a person of compassion and idealism.
I wanted a partner who was a gifted administrator, but also possesses the gift of curiosity, an open, inquiring mind, and the confidence to change even her strongest opinions in the face of contrary evidence.
World News from the BBC. The main opposition group in Venezuela says it's managed to register a candidate for presidential elections in July, despite its first and second choices being declined. Edmundo Gonzalez, a former ambassador, will stand against the incumbent Nicolas Maduro. The US and Brazil said they were deeply concerned that neither Corina Juris nor the group's leader Maria Corina Machado had been allowed to register. The lawyer of the American rapper Sean Diddy Combs has criticised Monday's raids by US federal agents on Mr. Combs' properties as a gross overuse of military-level force. In a statement, the lawyer dismissed media speculation that his client had been arrested and described the accusations of his involvement in sex trafficking as meritless. He added that the music mogul had cooperated with the authorities in their search and would continue to fight to clear his name. Dachshunds, also known as sausage dogs, could be banned in Germany under a new law which would prohibit breeding practices that harm animals' welfare. Dachshunds are prone to spinal problems linked to their short legs and long backs, Ella Bicknell reports. With its short legs and long body, the Dachshund is one of Germany's most beloved breeds. But Germany's National Kennel Club says the breed is under threat under a new draft law that wants to clamp down on the unethical breeding practices that inflict long-term suffering on animals. It takes stronger action against the illegal puppy trade, but also outlines a ban on breeding dogs with skeletal abnormalities. The Kennel Club argued that phrase is ambiguous, and the Dachshund could fall into the category. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has congratulated his country's men's football team after they beat Iceland in a playoff final to qualify for this summer's European Championships. He said the team's success showed that whenever Ukrainians face difficulties, they don't give up and certainly win. BBC News.
Hello and welcome to Business Analysis here on the BBC World Service, where we're going to start the programme by continuing our coverage of events in Baltimore. I'll be joined throughout the programme by two guests on opposite sides of the world. We have Andy Xi with us, a familiar voice on the programme, independent economist, of course based there in China's commercial capital, Shanghai. Andy, welcome to the programme.
Good morning, Rahul.
Good morning. Always a pleasure to speak to you. And we've also got Michelle Jamrisko, who is Bloomberg's White House correspondent, of course, based in Washington, D.C. Michelle, where we've had the president, haven't we, talking about the events that we've seen unfold in Baltimore.
Yeah, that's just a tragic unfolding of events there from early morning U.S. time on Tuesday to now, where we stand, and we have 6 construction workers still missing and really presumed dead at this point after that tragic event.
Yeah, we have indeed. Let us just remind you of some of the events that have taken place in Baltimore, an important port there in the United States, where a container ship brought down an important bridge, blocking those shipping lanes. Cars and people were sent hurtling into the Patapsco River. Here's what one man said.
One of the know what the bang was. Ship hit the key bridge, sinking. The bridge is gone. Holy hell.
The US Coast Guard says that 6 people still missing after that container ship brought down that bridge are now presumed dead. Speaking at a news conference, Rear Admiral Shannon Gilray said the US Coast Guard was suspending its search and rescue efforts for the bridge.
Based on the length of time that we've gone in the search, the extensive search efforts that we've put into it, the water temperature, that at this point we do not believe that we're going to find any of these individuals still alive. And so this evening at around 7:30, we are going to suspend the active search and rescue efforts. The Coast Guard's not going away. None of our partners are going away, but we're just going to transition to a different phase.
Let's take you to Baltimore and speak to Emily Opilo, who is a reporter for the Baltimore Sun. She joins us now. Emily, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure it's been a difficult day for you and many other people in Baltimore. Can you just remind our listeners of what actually happened here?
Sure. Well, as you mentioned there previously, the Francis Scott Key Bridge, known as the Key Bridge to most of us here in town, it's a major artery through Baltimore. It's been there since the 1970s. Collapsed around 1:30 a.m. This morning, our time. It was struck by a massive, container ship. The impact was quite loud, could be heard on the shores on either side of the Patapsco River, the waterway that feeds Baltimore's harbor. The first crews on the scene pulled 2 people from the harbor, one who walked away without injury, miraculously, and refused medical treatment, and another who was taken to an area hospital with very serious injuries. And, throughout the day today, rescue crews searched the waters around the collapsed site. They, as you mentioned, were looking for at least 6 people who had been reported missing, and those people are believed to have been working in a construction crew that was on top of the bridge at the time that it collapsed. And as night fell this evening, we got word from emergency officials that they are now calling off the rescue operation and moving to a recovery phase, meaning that they presume the people in the harbor are now likely to be dead based upon the conditions.
Tell us a little bit about the port, how busy it is, how important it is, what sort of goods come into it, how vital it is to the city's economy.
Right, well, early efforts here have justifiably focused on the search and rescue operation that's happening in the wake of the collapse, but there's really a lot to consider about the likely economic impact that it's going to have. Baltimore's port is a major hub for world commerce. It's one of only 3 on the East Coast that can accommodate the largest ships in the world, and with all vessel traffic now halted currently, there is no way in or out. That's very likely to disrupt shipping and supply chains in a pretty serious way. To give you an idea of impacts we might see, Baltimore's port ranks first in the United States for handling cars and light trucks. It also ranks first for farm and construction equipment. It ranks first for sugar and gypsum. And those are just some of the products that we see the most. Baltimore is also a major exporter of coal, or the second in the United States, which has some implications for overseas markets.
Emily, stay with us for a couple of minutes if you don't mind. We often on this program, when we're looking at the problems that shipping is facing, and as Emily said, that there has been a human cost here that we, of course, have looked at, but we do have to look at the economic costs as well. We turn to Lorianne LaRocco. She is the global supply chain reporter for CNBC. I asked her how long it could be before the port is back up and running properly.
It could be weeks, it could be months. It really depends on so many different factors of how easy it is to clean up the port. I mean, when you look at it, the vessel itself, she is under the bridge. Like the bridge collapsed on top of her. And then, of course, you've got the rest of the bridge in the water. You're going to have to do dredging. You're going to have to do, analysis on the vessel itself. How you're going to tow her back to port. You already have had ocean carriers like Maersk, notify clients that they are, it's called blanking, canceling the port. But the problem is, not everybody has a great logistics system in terms of tracking their containers. You will have retailers not know where their containers are until they get to a port.
Well, I want to pick up on that point because we wanted to get a sense from retailers in the US of what they're thinking at the moment. As you said there, this is very early. People still trying to work out what's going on. So we've been speaking to John Gull. He's the Vice President of Supply Chain Policy at the US National Retail Federation.
Obviously, Baltimore is a key port for a lot of retailers, and there are a lot of other commodities that rely on that port as well. They're trying to figure out what cargo is currently on vessels that are stuck at the port. So looking at some of the surrounding ports where cargo might be diverted to, whether that's New York, New Jersey, which is typically a first stop, Norfolk, or further down the coast, or even Philadelphia and Wilmington.
We had the pandemic, which had a huge impact on supply chains. Does that mean that retailers are now better prepared to deal with problems in supply chains like we're seeing that may arise from what's happening in Baltimore?
Yeah, I think so. Even in advance of the pandemic, there were always times where you had supply chain disruptions that you had to deal with.
Lorianne, interesting to hear John talking there about the ability of companies now to deal with supply chain issues because they've been through so much recently, haven't they? So does that make them more equipped to deal with whatever problems we see at the Port of Baltimore?
It really depends on the inventory, if you will, of the retailers. The industry that's going to be hurt the most are the automobiles. The Port of Baltimore, even though it's the 11th largest port in the United States, right? A lot of people may think like, oh, that's not a big deal. But it is a big deal. It's the largest port that exports and imports automobiles in. Automobiles are just on time. And so if you have a car, that you ordered, say from Germany, you're now going to have to wait.
Emily, we looked there at some of the lot bigger economic consequences for the United States and its economy. But people in Baltimore must be wondering about the economic consequences for them. So many people are dependent on the port, either directly or indirectly, aren't they?
That's absolutely true, yeah. And, we think about the port as, travel by sea, but really there's a lot of land travel that's also affected by this. That's going to have a large economic impact. The products that we're exporting and getting in there have to have access to the port, and one of the main points where they were accessing it was the Key Bridge. It carried 12.4 million commercial and passenger vehicles in 2023. That's 34,000 a day. It's a major East Coast connector in the United States. It links cities along the I-95 corridor, which goes up and down Washington, D.C. to the south, Philadelphia, New York City to the north. The site's a real linchpin, and I think we're going to be feeling the economic impact for a while to come. Today we reported at the Sun that the port stands to lose $15 million per day that it remains closed.
That is a huge amount of money. We have no idea, do we, how long it could remain closed for. Are there questions around in Baltimore about how this has happened?
Absolutely, and I think we're going to be looking at those answers in the coming days. The bridge itself was not a top priority in terms of bridges that had been analyzed to be structurally deficient. It had been graded a fine. I believe a lot of my coworkers did that fine reporting, so I don't have it all in front of me. But there's already been a lot of conversation about the buffering system that was around the bridge and whether it should have withstood an impact. Some people feel that it was not enough, and other people are saying with these massive cargo ships, there's really no way for any bridge to withstand a direct hit. So that's something that's going to be investigated in the days to come.
Emily, thank you so much for joining us on Business Matters here and bringing us up to date with what is happening in Baltimore at this moment in time. Andy, can I bring you in here? Because if we go back to February in Guangzhou, didn't we, a big port in southern China, we had a smaller vessel carrying stacks of containers that hit a bridge, causing vehicles to fall off there. So China has had some experience of this as well. Did they ever get to the bottom of what caused that there?
Yeah, I think that obviously you will have an accident like this from time to time. The issue is that you need to have a system that is resilient. I think that Chinese infrastructure is obviously much newer and designed for the 21st century. So it's unthinkable that a collision like that would bring down a major bridge. It means that the bridge is not designed properly. And so I think that the U.S. has the disadvantage of having built this like 100 years ago. And the current modern logistics is very different. So and most bridges in the United States basically not very safe by today's standards. So according to civil engineers, the U.S. has to spend trillions of dollars just to fix the roads and bridges. So that's something that the U.S. has to address. They need to spend the money.
Michelle, there is, of course, this was a tragic accident that took place involving the ship. But Andy's point is one that we have discussed before on this program, the world's largest economy, the US, but at times its infrastructure is crumbling, isn't it?
Well, and it's a point that President Biden makes all the time. He's no stranger to infrastructure issues, and a personal fan himself of Amtrak. He'll tell you, for anyone who will listen to those stories. His administration has talked about one of their historic achievements being the bipartisan infrastructure law, which has come up in conversations today as Biden is very passionate about saying they want to rebuild this bridge as quickly as possible, and he believes it should be with federal government money. Now, he is setting up a big funding fight with Congress on that, and he already has a few of those in process. But the point is that they have addressed the fact that infrastructure is not pristine. It's not up to the levels that they would want it to be, that they should expect it to be with the world's largest economy. But in this case, I think especially we're still asking questions about the vessel itself and what happened with the vessel. So I think, the conversation can quickly go to the infrastructure piece of the bridge itself. But in this case, the bridge was hit by something that had clearly a separate problem and still being worked out.
Yeah, but on that issue of infrastructure, it is one that divides people in the US. On the one hand, you have those who think there should be huge investment. On the other, across the political divide, the Republicans don't support that, do they?
Well, I think there's a lot of debate about how to fund it. I think there's not as much debate that it is needed. And the Biden administration, they did pass that in a bipartisan fashion, this law, to get a lot of money pumped out to the states. And they do like to say that some of their other initiatives to provide funding for these sorts of things did not pass in a bipartisan manner, and yet they're pointing out that some Republicans whose constituencies benefited from that sort of funding are now trying to claim credit for it. So there is a convenient fight going on, but yes, not everyone wants federal money to be at the forefront of this. I think we're right at the start of this debate, but I think the point is from the top you're hearing that this needs to kind of get done as quickly as possible, as quickly as you can rebuild such an iconic bridge like that one.
Andy, last words to you on this one. We talk a lot about the Chinese economy slowing down. We talk a lot about the problems within the housing market there. When it comes to infrastructure, have we seen a slowing down on spending in that area as well?
No, you look at the build-up in solar power last year was a record. The increase was more than the total in the U.S. So and you look at a high-speed rail or highway, the speed remains about the same. I think that in times like this, when the property market is not doing well, the government is not going to slow down on infrastructure. It's a temporary support for the economy.
Whenever we talk about the US and China, when we have guests on from both these two big economies, we inevitably end up talking about this man.
The company behind former President Donald Trump's social media app, Truth Social, has gone public, and it is off to a strong start.
Yeah, shares in Donald Trump's media company, well, they're up about 50% at one stage. They came down quite a little bit later, and the first day of trading of Trump Media and Technologies. Truth Social, of course, started off as a SPAC, which was formed to raise money through an initial public offering to buy another company. So, with a bit of analysis on today's events as it listed on the stock exchange, I've been speaking to Usha Rodriguez. She's an expert on SPACs from the University of Georgia in Athens in the United States, and she's been following it all very closely.
The SPAC stock, the DWAC stock, traded for a long time. So we've seen right when it was announced, and this merger I've been following for a long time. It was first proposed in October of 21. And it traded up to over $80 a share when it was announced. So there was a lot of meme stock activity initially when it was proposed, and then there was definitely some trouble in terms of the SPAC. There were investigations, lawsuits. There was a settlement with the SEC to the tune of $16 million. So it has had a rocky road getting to this point, but there has been a history of sort of meme stock high volatility. So I was a little surprised that it got quite as high as it did today, but it's a company, and maybe we can talk about this, that's not really trading as much on fundamentals as it is on excitement over Donald Trump.
Okay, is that because people think he's going to be the president and therefore they think this is a good investment? I mean, if he doesn't become the president, does it begin to sink?
I don't really know. I mean, the company is obviously a social media company. So in terms of the fundamentals, you're thinking about, well, is there a market for this sort of conservative or Trump-based social media, and can they monetize it better than other social media companies? But if you're not thinking about that way, if you're thinking about it more like a meme stock, then the question becomes, do I think that associating with Trump's brand is going to be exciting and enticing to other investors so that if I can get in, more people will pile in because they want to be associated with Trump's persona, with his brand, and that will be good for me.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see which way it goes. I suppose for Donald Trump, you know, he does have a few financial issues of his own at the moment. He needs to raise quite a lot of money, but he can't get access to his stake in the company at the moment, can he?
No, that's right. So, it makes sense that typically with these sorts of deals, after the merger, there's a lockup, what's called a lockup. There's a certain amount of time where these founders and big shareholders can't cash out, can't sell their shares. And that's one, you know, just because we don't want a whole lot of shares flooding the market, it will drive down the price. And then two, because it doesn't look good in terms of optics for someone like Donald Trump, who's such a major shareholder and is such a major part of the company, to be suddenly dumping his shares and heading to the hills.
Interesting, Michelle, to hear that analysis from Usha Rodriguez there. Here's a question for you. If President Biden was to launch his own social media company, would it be valued at $8 billion, which is what Donald Trump's is valued at the moment?
I don't know about that. I mean, I think we're, in terms of Biden social media, we've been debating TikTok and whether or not he's right to be on it and if it's consistent with his policies and values. But I think he's a little bit behind in terms of establishing his own media company at this point.
Yeah, maybe other things on his mind at the...
Not really his style. Yeah.
Not his style, but who knows how things could change. Andy, let's get that economics out on of yours. If we look at a valuation per user, you know, Snapchat's at $46, X at $80, Truth Social at over $1,096 per user, shows that maybe a little bit overvalued?
Yeah, obviously, it's usually like that in the tech space. But keep in mind that this is, I believe, is betting on Donald Trump getting elected again. So that means that he would have staying power for many years to come. And there is a potential for the company to build up like Facebook. You look at Facebook, is worth over $1 trillion. If you look at it from that perspective, so it could be worthwhile punt.
Well, there we go. Andy seems to be quite excited about this. Michelle, we've got you with us. Can I talk to you about the US economy? It seems